There are a total of 7 ways to explain these 4 truths. That's it. I don't know there's an 8th way. If there was, I would have looked at it. The only question is, which of these 7 explanations actually makes sense of the evidence? Look, 2 men were killed with Jesus at the same time. But when they came to collect the bodies, those 2 guys weren't dead. They had to break their legs to make sure they were dead. Instead, they just stick them with a spear in the side. Really? People survive spears. John, who's a fisherman, said that water came out of his side. What's with the water? But if you happen to be in the right position, water will accumulate in your lungs. That's called pleural effusion. And because that lung is like a sac that holds it separate from your body, if I stab that, you will see the water run out. But he saw it, so he recorded it. In the first century, people understood what death looked like. Everyone had touched a dead body. You know why? No funeral homes, no coroners. You bury your own. If you die on a cross, your feet will swell and turn purple. Do you really think that these people taking Jesus' body off the cross would have mistakenly wrapped a living person? But it's not reasonable, and that's why I cross it off. But hey, maybe they were just lying about this. It turns out to be successful in a lie, in a conspiracy with others, you need 5 things. I'm going to teach you the 5 things, okay? Here we go. First thing you need is you need the smallest number of co-conspirators. Also, you want to hold it for the shortest period of time. You have to have excellent communication. 4th thing, you need the strongest possible relationship to do this well. It's not just James and John and Peter. It's not even just the 12. Acts 1 says in the upper room there were 120 who had seen the risen Christ. That's too many people. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15 there are 500 who saw the risen Christ on the same day that could be interviewed by the Corinthians. Really? Way too many. If all you did was tell me that was how many we started with, I'm going to say that's not a reasonable conspiracy. If you think that 500 people can keep a secret, you're crazy. First of all, there's too many disciples. There are. But if you're thinking, well, maybe they only hold it for a short time. So how long are they holding the conspiracy? No, it's 6 decades. You want me to believe that 500 plus people were able to keep a lie for several generations? Like no one at some point is going to say it's not worth it? Are you really? Okay, that's just crazy to me. To get to the truth, whatever it took. And that's what was happening here. You don't think that these guys were torturing these guys? Yeah, they were. Yet nobody ever breaks. Nobody ever changes their story. Weird. But there's a guy here who's not related to anybody. He's not even a friend of anybody. He wasn't like part of the discipleship of John the Baptist, okay? He didn't know all the other guys. No, he was a guy who was an outcast that nobody wanted in the group, okay? They wouldn't even go to his house the night they invited him into his group. They didn't want to step foot in his house. This dude's name was Levi. He was a tax collector. He later became Matthew. He's this guy down here. Why in the world would he not hold on to this lie, allegedly, if he's not related to any of these people? He's not even their friends. Seriously? I mean, this to me is not reasonable. It's just too easy to break, especially given that nobody ever changed their story. So for me, is it possible? Anything is possible. I don't think it's reasonable. I cross it off. Oh, maybe they hallucinated it. You know, they wanted Jesus to be alive. This doesn't make any sense here. And then it gets weirder because you have accounts, multiple accounts where more than one person sees the risen Christ and tells the story for years to follow. Like on the road to Emmaus, you have at least 2. So when 2 people are recalling the exact same details, it bugs me. And this happens over and over again. You have the Marys, right? They require that they actually recite the same thing at the tomb. There's 3 of them. Here there's 7 at the lake. I couldn't even get them all on the same screen. Okay, I tried to. Couldn't all fit. So there's 2 over here. Okay. They all see the same thing. Remember the upper room? No Judas, no Thomas. So we have 10 here who see the same thing at the same time. That bothers me. Then later on, Thomas comes back, and now he joins their group, and now we have several of these where you have at least the 11. That bothers me. This episode here at the mountaintop, I'm not even sure how many. It's not clear if it's just the 12 or if it's all the other. Remember, there's 120 in the upper room who had seen the risen Christ. I don't know how many are here. It's at least, though, the 11. It's at least those. Then there's this episode here where he's going to ascend into heaven. By the way, forget about the resurrection for a second. What if Jesus never died on a cross, he never rose from the grave, but at the end of his ministry, he rose into the air and ascended into heaven? At least 11 who saw that. Probably more. Finally, Paul says there are 500 who saw the risen Christ. And by the way, if you wanted to falsify this, I don't believe you had a vision, you had a hallucination. That's not true. It's pretty simple to falsify it. Just go back to the tomb. If I imagined the resurrection, there'll be a body in the tomb. If there's no body in the tomb, now I'm back to conspiracy theory. Somebody had to steal the body out. And you already know why I reject conspiracy theories. It's not a cleverly designed story. It's actually what just happened. We saw it. We were eyewitnesses of his majesty. So for me, is it possible? Anything's possible. It's not reasonable, though. I crossed it out. Maybe they were fooled by an imposter because it's an imposter who's pretending to be Jesus. So if you're telling me that there is somebody out here who was able to con the disciples, they would also need these two things: the confidence of the disciples and know more about Jesus than they do. That means it's probably going to be somebody from the inner circle who was there to hear everything Jesus said so he could sound like Jesus later. So who's that going to be? And they're going to need help because we've got to get that empty tomb thing done, okay? So I'm just kind of trying to figure out who this could be. The problem I have with this is that the Jesus after the resurrection is every bit as miraculous as the Jesus. This is going to be a really good con man because he has to do all the magic too. He has to appear miraculously. He has to perform miracles. He has to ascend into heaven miraculously. Really? You think a con man did that? This to me is a weak explanation. I just don't think it's reasonable, so I crossed it. It's the last one. Were they distorted? In other words, is this a late legend? Jesus lived, but there's no resurrection because that is a late legend. That part's not true about Jesus. Now, you already know that it's not. This is pretty easy to overcome because to be a late legend, you need two things. You need to be late and a legend. But you already know from yesterday that it's not late. Remember, I showed you that timeline. It's early. It's an early story. The resurrection is part of the very first ever recorded documents related to Christianity. And it's not a legend because we traced it over time. Do you remember? That chain of custody shows us that it didn't change over time. So this, to me, if someone told me it's a late legend, I'm going to say, no. There's no way it's a late legend because it's neither late nor distorted. The Christian explanation is simply that those are telling the truth. Those documents are telling, okay, look, every explanation has strengths and weaknesses. Even the true explanation, the Christian explanation does best explain those four things we're trying to explain. Those four things we're trying to explain are absolutely reasonable if, in fact, he rose from the grave. But I would have said, here's the weakness in your case. The weakness in your case is that it requires a resurrection in the first place. Think about it. You want me to believe that the most reasonable explanation is that a guy returns from the grave. Think about it. I'll show you some evidence. I'll show you how early the documents are. Don't care. Don't believe in supernatural junk. Well, I could show you, how often they're quoted, but don't care. Don't believe in the supernatural. Well, I could show you archaeology. Don't care. And if I have this attitude, no matter what I show you, you will find a way to jump over it because you are determined to get to this end. And the reason why you're determined to get to that end is because that's where you started and you don't want to move. So no matter what I do, you're just going to end up where you started. That is not reasonable. You're not listening or looking at the evidence because you think you know the answer before you started. Look, in the end, it's going to come down to two things. Either Jesus rose from the grave or he didn't. Simple. If he did, Christianity is true. If he didn't, it's not true. Now, I'll tell you as an atheist, if you want me to look at all the possible explanations including the supernatural ones. Well, of course, I'd have to in order to get over there. Nope, not doing that because I don't believe in the supernatural. That prevented me from getting to that conclusion. But to be honest, if you look at all the other possible explanations, they don't work. They have their own obstacles. I didn't care. I would have found a way to dig under these, to go around these, to go through these, jump over them, whatever I have to do to get over here. Because I wanted to be here. I didn't care that none of these explanations work. And by the way, when you see people offer you 6 explanations, there's a reason why they're offering 6. They know they don't work. Dude who holds number 5 does not believe that number 1, 2, 3, 4, or 6 works. Dude who holds number 3 does not believe 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6 work. There's so many explanations on this side because everyone knows they don't work. Which of these 2 paths has the least number of obstacles? And by the way, there's only one obstacle on that other side, and I put it there. I could easily take it down. This is about my bias against the supernatural. Don't care, I'm not taking it down. I don't believe in the supernatural. As an atheist, I believed in what's called Big Bang cosmology. That the entire universe came into existence instantaneously. All things in the universe, all space, time, and matter came into existence from nothing. So that first cause is already outside of nature because nature doesn't exist until space, time, and matter, operated on by physics and chemistry, emerges. So I thought to myself, wait a minute, hold on. I already believe in at least one thing that's outside of nature, that's supernatural, that whatever that first cause is. And so if that first cause happens to be a personal being, do you think it will be like small potatoes to walk on water, small potatoes to do resurrection? The most dramatic miracle in Scripture, if this is true, is Genesis 1. Everything from nothing. And I realized, wow, this is a bias I'm holding. Really, I already believe in at least one extranatural, supernatural cause. So I pulled it down. And then it was pretty clear. At some point I realized the only thing standing between me and the resurrection, me and the cross of Jesus, was me.